Welcome to the Deep Dive,
Emerald City Hockey's Seattle Kraken podcast.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Deep Dive, Emerald City Hockey's Seattle Kraken podcast. And RJ, it was a pretty eventful week for the Kraken, one which we learned a lot. We were looking forward to this past week where the Kraken were really going to face their toughest test. They had three good teams come into Climate Pledge Arena. Kraken played against them. Results, maybe not as bad as they seem on paper. We'll get into it. But I think it was a pretty solid week overall.
Yeah, and I think most importantly, we learned a lot about this team, what they are, and I think we have some really more solid takeaways that we can give you on a podcast like this, compared with last week where we basically just said, look, we're going to learn a lot about this team. I think we have learned now.
Yes. And did we learn stuff or did we confirm what our suspicion was all along? I think it might
be closer to the latter.
Might be closer to the latter, yeah. That being said, this was a homestand here for the Kraken. They are going on the road for this next kind of week and a half. And that means, RJ, it's time to shift focus from Climate Pledge Arena over to Queen Anne Beer Hall. The best place to watch Kraken road games is down there at the beer hall. You all already know this, but we're going to say it again because each time I feel like more and more people could be in there watching Kraken games, RJ.
Oh yeah, definitely. And we hear from people who go and have a fantastic time. This is not something new, but I know, Dylan, you're going out there kind of on the road. You're going to be at the Toronto game.
Yeah.
So let's make Dylan jealous. Especially for that Toronto game, go to Queen Anne Beer Hall. Show him what he's missing.
Yes, it is not hard to make me feel homesick. And certainly seeing people eating pretzels at the beer hall would do it. So if you're somebody who wants to make me feel homesick, go to the beer hall.
I know there's some people listening to this out there that would be in that camp.
And really, this is the last like road trip. Just talking about schedule here for a sec, RJ. Like this is like the that's gonna be it for like a month basically. They're gonna have three road games. Yeah, they're gonna have three road games later on in November, but it's just like a quick little jaunt down to California and then a home and home on back-to-back nights with San Jose. That lovely time. I'm sure it's gonna be great. So look, if you don't want to have to pay the steep cover charge to go into Climate Pledge Arena to watch some Kraken hockey, this is a good time to head over to the beer hall for this road trip. The thing that I want to talk about before we get into the Kraken as a whole, RJ, here real quick is I have a unique question for you because this is just kind of a unique stat for one of the Kraken players. And that is that Jordan Eberly, the captain, being the ultimate captain here, RJ, not only is he second on the team in scoring, first in goal scoring for his club, he's getting it done on the other end of the ice. 11 blocks, 0 hits. So my question to you, RJ, is how many blocks does Jordan Eberly reach before he finally records a hit?
Oh, man, that is a good question. I love a unique stat like that. That is great. I'll give him 5 more. I'll say 16 blocks before his first hit. Although, actually, now that I think about it, because hits can kind of vary from building to building, right? He played a lot of these last games at home. It probably won't take too long. I don't know which building score hits which way, but you're going to be in 5 different buildings, 5 different nights. I bet there's going to be some scorer that's going to be eager to give him a hit. So maybe less than that, actually.
Yes, I just have a feeling just because I brought it up purely, he's going to get one on like the first shift in Montreal, probably. just
go out there, hit somebody immediately.
Go out there, hit somebody immediately, get on the board. Only Kraken player outside of the goaltenders to not record a hit yet so far this season, Jordan Eberly. That being said, does good work on the forecheck. Like this is not to say he's not playing hard or anything like that. Obviously, the 11 blocks are huge as a winger. It's just... I just think it's interesting. He gets it done in a different way. Doesn't have to fly in there, throw the body around. He knows just how to go in there, strip somebody of the puck, get out of the board battle quick and easy.
Yeah, and he seems like he always has the puck when he's out there, so hard to get a hit when that's the case.
Exactly. Focused on better priorities, like leading the team in goal scoring. All right, so the Kraken, we alluded to it earlier, RJ. They're kind of what we've been talking about all offseason and through training camp, what we think that the Kraken are going to be, and that is a perfectly mid team. And just to kind of drive that point home, beyond just their 4-4-1 record, which is beautifully mid right there. They also have 28 goals for, 28 goals against, RJ, both of which are good for 14th in the league.
Right there around the middle too. Yeah, it's exactly mid. That is what this team is. And look, there are different ways of getting there. You can get to that record by kind of upsetting some good teams, maybe blowing some games against bad teams. But the Kraken haven't really done that. I think what this schedule so far has shown is that they're better than the bad teams, but they're worse than the good teams. And it's roughly in line with who they're playing against, right? They are beating the teams they're supposed to beat. They are losing to the teams that are kind of clearly more talented than them, that you'd say maybe this is a scheduled loss. And that's just kind of what it is. I mean, these last three games against Colorado, Winnipeg, Carolina, those are all playoff teams and good ones from last year. You do lose all three of those. You can play them close, but that kind of showed, I think, the ceiling for where this team really is at. But the good news with that is that the NHL, it's a league where half the teams make the playoffs. And so you can be mid and still make the playoffs. And so I think that path still very much exists there.
Yes, that is the big takeaway for me for this week, is that I haven't necessarily changed my thoughts on the team as a whole, as far as like kind of how good they are, who they're going to be able to beat kind of on a nightly basis, all of that kind of stuff. But I have changed my idea of where they might finish the year. And that is, I think they can go, sneak into the playoffs and be on the right side of the bubble versus the wrong side, because what I did see from them is that this is not last year's club. Last year's club played bad teams close, got stomped by good teams. This year's club seems to stomp on bad teams and play good teams close, which is a massive shift for what they need to do. And if we're saying they're better than half the teams in the league, they're not as good as the other half, that inherently implies a 500 record, which would be 82-ish points in the standings. How many you think you need to make the playoffs? Maybe like 92,
95 or so.
95, right? So all of a sudden you just need to find a way to flip like 6 games along the way somewhere. Just got to win 6 games against a team that's maybe better than you on paper, or drag some of those games into overtime the way you did with the Winnipeg game. And I think with this club, especially if they get Vince Dunn back sooner after he's eligible to return, I think that's something that this club should be able to do.
Yeah, or you win games like against Nashville or Minnesota, which they've done already, and those two teams probably should be in that camp. I know Nashville's had a rough start, but when you're projecting out, those two teams should also be in that kind of mid camp. And basically it's about getting ahead of those other teams. And so as the schedule goes on and you start to play, later in this month, LA, teams like that, you can kind of gain some ground on them by winning those games. And everything I've seen from this team shows me that, yeah, they can win those games. Like, they're playing the really good teams close. They can absolutely be competitive in those. So I feel like, I guess, more confident than I was a week ago that this could be a playoff team.
I agree with that. Now, there's still some things that give me pause. Real quick, though. PDO for the Kraken, RJ, 100.7, good for 15th in the league. No matter what stat I pull up, just know they're going to be between like 14th and 17th in the NHL. That's just exactly where they are.
Didn't we talk last week about JFresh posting the different stats, the things that are
on all of them.
kind of proxies for luck, and the Kraken remain just right in the middle there.
Yeah, which again is good. It means the results are reflecting how you're playing, so to speak, right? Like, you're not getting destroyed by bad luck. You're not riding a wave of good luck and it's all a mirage and it can come crumbling down at any point. Like, the Kraken are getting the result that they're earning. And I think that does help for predictability's sake. The one thing though that is a little worrying for me, RJ, is actually the thing that we saw in this last game against Carolina. And that is a little bit of what we saw in the third period against the Blues. We saw this a little bit in the Calgary game, although the Kraken were just better than Calgary and able to win that one. And that is, if the other team is going to really commit to taking away what the Kraken want to do, the Kraken struggle, right? And so that's something, I know it's still early on. We're only 9 games in. there's going to be time, there's going to be the ability for them to work in more and more options if another team really commits to forechecking hard, not letting the Kraken get the breakouts that they want, not letting them go to the net the way they want, not letting them move through the neutral zone with speed the way they want, right? These are all the things that Carolina was able to keep the Kraken from doing. I still think though overall it's kind of it's still something that in some ways you could look at positively, RJ, because one, it means other teams have to commit to stopping you, which means they're not then going to, in theory, be game planning for themselves, right? And so it kind of means you deserve that respect, and maybe that opens things up on their end, or it makes them less dangerous, the way it did for Calgary, where Calgary was incapable of doing anything for itself because they only had enough bandwidth to just stop the Kraken. But what we saw with Carolina was Carolina can do what they want to do and stop you at the same time. That's something the Kraken are going to struggle against. But that's only going to be a limited number of teams. I feel like only a limited number of teams are going to walk in, of the good teams, RJ, the teams that the Kraken need to pick up those 5, 6, 7 games over the course of the year against. That's only something a limited number of those teams are going to do to the Kraken, where they're going to really walk in and say, we're going to game plan hard for this game against this opponent and really like make their lives miserable and keep them from doing anything that they want to do. That feels like a Rod Brindamore type of thing. And I think this week kind of proved that, because Colorado didn't do that and Winnipeg didn't do that. And so as long as you keep running into coaches that aren't going to be as weirdly serious as Rod Brindamore is, you're probably fine.
Right. And I was going to bring up the contrast between the Colorado and Winnipeg games versus the Carolina game, because I think those two teams are every bit as good as Carolina.
Yeah.
But you could tell that they didn't have that specific game plan ready for the Kraken and the way that they played. Winnipeg especially. I think that's one where it almost feels like they were just not concerned at all. They were just trying to play their own game, play exactly how they like to play, move the puck up to the neutral zone quickly. And they would make some mistakes there, and the Kraken would hit them with speed coming back, and they were able to make it a pretty competitive game. It went to overtime. I mean, that's basically a coin flip. And so if you can get yourselves into games like that, I think the Kraken are certainly capable of picking up points in games like that. But yeah, when Carolina had a plan, and I think specifically what that plan was too, and maybe it also coincides with the way that they just like to play against everybody. I think that's part of it too, is how they match up, because Coach Dan kind of warned us about this, or talked about it that morning before the Hurricanes game. He said, Carolina plays with a lot of aggression and a lot of pressure, defensively, offensively, everywhere. They are on you. And that was certainly the case in that game against the Kraken. All 60 minutes too, they never let up. And so when you look at what the Kraken are trying to do, they're trying to move the puck up the ice quickly. They're trying to get it through the neutral zone quickly. They're trying to make it a track meet, right? But when you're in your D zone and you have a Canes player all over you, you have half a second to think about it. You can't get that pass to start things off when you're through the neutral zone and you have guys right on you at the red line. You can't make the passes you want to make. And it just completely threw off their timing. And I'm curious to see if Coach Dan and the coaching staff really has a way to counteract that when a team can bring that. I mean, Calgary tried. They tried to do something like that, as you mentioned. They just didn't have the talent to kind of back it up and do it well. But I do wonder if there is kind of a counter adjustment the next time a team tries to do that.
Yeah.
Because it's not like they didn't see it coming.
Right. And it sounds like, and because, Dan was asked about that. He was asked point blank, was it frustrating or disappointing that you knew this was coming and you still like kind of weren't able to deal with it effectively? And his whole thing was, look, if you know that you're going to be in that situation, it means you have to go with your first gut read and instinct rather than looking for the best pass to make, right? And just because you're being pressured doesn't mean necessarily that you're not going to get that breakout pass out. It just means that you might not get the best version of that breakout pass, right? It means you might have to have like an intermediary, right, up at the top of the defensive zone that you're really passing to, and then they're going to make that outlet pass, right, because they're going to have a little bit more time than maybe your defenseman who's deeper in the zone. So I think that that's something that the team will work on for the next time they face a team that is so aggressive on the forecheck, is just don't really think about it. Don't look for the home run pass. Don't look for the best pass you can make. Just take the pass that you can make. Get the puck moving in a positive direction. Let's not turn it over in our own zone. Let's not get bogged down. and just kind of go from there. And I do think that there are some guys on this team that are better at that than others. There's been a couple times this week, and it's one of the players I want to talk about from this past week is Matty Beniers. There's been a couple times up on the press bridge I've turned to you, right, with Matty Beniers, and I'm just like, gosh, it feels like his gut read is right when he goes to make a pass, and then between him recognizing where he needs to be passing to and then the pass actually leaving, he sometimes starts overthinking it. And then all of a sudden the pass will be like split between two players. Like he just kind of can't decide on who to give it to or something like that. And I think that that's the kind of mentality that the Kraken need to kind of get out of there, is just see something, make the play. Just go for it, right? It doesn't need to be the 100% perfect play to make. As long as it's a positive play and the puck's moving in the right direction against a good team, that's all you got to do.
And you saw a positive example, I think, in the Carolina game on the one goal they did score, on the McCann goal, right, where the puck comes to Beniers, sees McCann breaking. I think it was off of a blocked shot or something, and he does not have time to overthink it. Like you have to just move that puck immediately. Sends a perfect pass up to Jared McCann, feeds him for a breakaway, and that's kind of what that quick thinking can do for you.
Exactly. So you just got to go with that instinct and get it out of there. And it seems like that's at least publicly what the coaching staff thinks when they're going to be facing similar situations. And I think that's better than trying to just on certain nights come up with a completely different game plan that would affect you in all three zones. Like that's not really realistic for the regular season. That's something you could worry about in the postseason if you get matched up against a Carolina type team. You're going to need to figure something out. But for the regular season, I think just working on that is probably the correct approach there for everybody involved.
Yeah, I would agree with that. You have to worry about your own game first. And that's what Dan has said from the beginning, right? We want other teams focused on us and how we play. I think if you're the team that's already reacting and adjusting, you're already kind of on the back foot a little bit.
Yes, exactly. And it does feel like the Kraken are doing a better job of winning multiple periods a night, like we kind of talked about on some of the post games. Kraken, it does seem like they win the first and third period pretty consistently. Other teams make an adjustment after the first period for the second period, kind of catches the Kraken. Unfortunately, it seems like they need to wait for that second intermission to then be able to make the counter adjustment and then come back out and be strong. But it is nice having a team that starts strong and finishes strong, RJ. We talked about them coming back in the Winnipeg game, which they needed to do. The Carolina game, we know the struggles there. They kind of overthinking things, weren't able to get their timing. That Colorado game, I think we forget because it was almost a full week ago. They came out of the start at that one, and they were on fire. And if not for just some bad puck luck and just kind of hockey happening, they would have jumped out to a very early lead in that one.
Yeah, they would have. I don't know how they didn't manage to score early in that game. They hit a couple posts early. They were just all over the Avs. It was, I think at that time, the most dominant first period they had all season, and it wasn't particularly close. And then you kind of have that deflating goal, heartbreak type of goal, late in the period. Kivi Ranta skates in and scores one. And that is kind of tough to bounce back from. But yeah, they deserved a lot better in that first period. I think had they just gotten one bounce, it's a very different looking game. And still, they put a push on in the third that was really admirable. And too little, too late on the Evans goal with 5 seconds to go. But you saw the underlying things that okay, yeah, the Kraken could beat a team like Colorado. And in a game like that, you probably do beat them most nights.
Yeah. They outplayed them for more of that game, and usually that will result in a victory. I think it was just bad puck luck in that one. You're able to come back, force overtime against Winnipeg. That was really solid. Like this was, despite the fact that you walk out of the week with only 1 point from the 3 games, I feel like there was just so many encouraging signs. And one of those also that I couldn't help but think about, RJ, was just if Vince Dunn's in the lineup, that these games go a little differently. Maybe not the Carolina one, just because of how kind of perfect Carolina matches up against you. Perfectly bad if you're the Kraken. But if Vince Dunn's in the lineup, I think you win either the Colorado game or the Winnipeg game for sure.
I agree with that. And I think that's something we ought to talk about this week too, is just life without Vince Dunn and how important he is. Look, this is something that we knew last season, right? Or even the year before, if he's missed any time, the team is just almost a goal worse from a goal scoring perspective. They're also worse defensively. Look, he's a heck of a player, and it sucks to have him out of the lineup. But we are seeing, I think, some of the effects of that, especially from a goal scoring perspective. I mean, these last 3 games, you have 6 goals. That's just averaging 2 goals a game. And I think the total splits, right, with him in or out of the lineup, I think it's like 2 goals without him average per game. It's about 3 goals with him, and that makes a big difference. And we are seeing that. And I know Coach Dan said that there's no excuse, right? He didn't want to say that that was a reason that they were losing or anything. He's like, look, other guys need to step up, and we have the guys who can step up. But that effect of having Vince Dunn out of the lineup, it's hard to ignore, and I think it's still kind of persisting.
Yes, I mean he helps offensively. Obviously, 3 points in 4 games for Vince Dunn. He'd be up there, probably top 3 on this team in scoring. Certainly, that pace would put him there. The other big thing, I mean, second in power play assists on the team. Right, the power play would be improved. That gets you, usually an extra goal or 2 maybe throughout a game if you're able to get that power play moving. I mean, not in the Colorado game. That's another thing that maybe would have swung the Colorado game, is just if you had a power play before there was literally 2 minutes left in the game. So I think Vince Dunn would make a big difference if he was out there. He would certainly help the club overall, and I think the results from this past week would be different. But that's, again, kind of something positive to look forward to, a reason to think that this is a team that could make the playoffs, because in theory, Vince Dunn should be out there for most of the rest of the season, and he can help you the next time you're in this situation. You have to face teams like this. You mentioned, though, the difference between kind of being like a 2-goal team and a 3-goal team, and that is really relevant, RJ, when you look at the Kraken's goaltending, and you look at both goaltenders. They're so different and yet so similar at the same time here, RJ. Their records are very different. You have Joey at 3-1-1. You've got Grubauer at 1-3. Their quality start percentage is extremely different. Joey at 600, Grubauer at 250. So obviously a little bit better there for Joey, or substantially better, if you will, for Joey Decord. Yet at the same time, RJ, just looking, and obviously it's not a perfect stat, but you look at just goals against average. They're both basically right around 3. Right, they're not far from 3. 2.95 for Joey, 3.10 for Grubauer. The results have been different. How they've gotten there has been different. But basically, the bottom line is, right now, this goaltending tandem for the Kraken is going to allow 3 goals a game. And that's the number that the Kraken are going to have to hit and outscore in order to win consistently.
Right, and I think we've seen that throughout this sample size of games. It does feel like you have to at least hit that number to be able to win. And the goaltending, has left something to be desired, I think, no matter who's in net. I will say Joey Decord last game against Carolina probably had his best game of the season.
Yep.
Kept the Kraken in it for as long as he possibly could, even though they were probably never going to win that game. So that's a good sign going forward. But the overall body of work, I think, is frankly just not been good enough. And even John Forsland kind of called that out I think it was on Sports Radio KJR the other day, where he said, there's great saves and there's goals you have to wonder about, and that's not good goaltending. And adding that it has been an alternating start type of thing so far, and it should be, because nobody's really grabbing this and running away with it. Now, that was before the Carolina game, but I still think the point stands when you look at the overall body of work from both goalies. I mean, diving a little deeper into stats that I think are a little bit more telling than like a save percentage, goals against average. I know we like goals saved above expected. And I think Evolving Hockey that's the place I choose to go for that. I think their model's a little better than, say, a Money Puck. And out of 65 eligible goalies, you have Joey Decord at 19th in goals saved above expected, which that's okay. And the last game really helped him with that. But you have Philip Grubauer at 46th. And you have that's basically a low end starter, and you have, like a mid-range backup numbers wise, right? As far as the rankings. And I guess you're not paying top 4 goalie money in the league for them yet. You will next season. That's just not the level that you would expect. And frankly, it does need to be better.
Yes. And that's, I think, if you were to ask me right now, where does this team need to improve? Where can the team be better? That's probably where I would say, right? Like they're doing things offensively. They're moving the puck up the ice. Obviously, you'd want better finishing, but we know the realities of this roster. There's not a ton of finishers on this roster. The goaltending, it just feels like could be better, right? And I know, Forsland said as such and all of that, but it's still the area where when I'm there at Climate Pledge, RJ, or if I'm watching at home, that's the one place where it still feels a little bit sometimes like last season, where it's just you see a goal go in that just kind of shouldn't, or it feels like it shouldn't anyway. Whether it should or it shouldn't, it feels like it shouldn't, or it feels like it's this death nail for the team, and it just feels emotionally devastating in a way. And I'm sure some of this is just being conditioned from last year, right? Like it hasn't necessarily always been this way, but stuff like the overtime game winner for Winnipeg, where it's just a leaky goal that's, just it shouldn't be scored on an NHL goaltender that way. Like that's just the bottom line, and it did. And it's one of those things where it's as much as it's trying to be positive and feeling positive about the overall improvements for this team and the way that they're playing, and the fact that, yes, you have a Brandon Montour or a Chandler Stevenson in the lineup, but it's largely the same group from last year. And look how much better they can be with just better coaching and having an idea of what they need to be doing and executing this game plan. Then the goaltending hits and you feel like you're getting sucked right back into last season.
Right. And there's really no room for error with this group, especially with Vince Dunn out of the lineup. And it does feel like every game, Carolina game, maybe an exception, but every game there's a goal that's scored that you have to make a save in that moment. And I've talked about it like the last couple of weeks too, usually in relation to Grubauer, but I think more recently we have seen it with Joey Daccord as well, where it's not so much about, making, it's how many, it is obviously at the end of the day, how many saves you make, but a lot of it is when you make them and the key points of a game where you need a save. And every game, it feels like there's one or two where you don't get that save in the key moments, whether it's like the Winnipeg overtime winner you mentioned, or, I talked about the second Dallas goal against Grubauer. There's just feels like there's one every game, and it's hard for a team to bounce back from when the goal scoring is already going to be an issue.
Right. And sometimes they're rough goals that are just kind of on the goaltender, and other times they're just like situations. And it's just like I think about two of the goals in the Colorado game. And it's just like darn, if Grubauer was just, his arms were like 2 inches longer, he makes these saves on these kind of perfectly placed shots. He doesn't really misplay them. Right? This isn't like the Dallas goal. This isn't like, some of the other goals that we've seen from really either of these guys in the past, where, whether it's Joey and his misadventures at times, or Grubauer and his just odd placement of his body in front of a shot. They're just, it's a good team making a play. It's a shooter executing and hitting the one spot that they can actually hit. And but it has the same feel. It has the same kind of emotional feel to it, where it's just like, come on, like, how do you not get a save here? Like, how does that go in? Like, this isn't good. If this goes in, this really kind of flips things. And that's the way those goals felt, in addition to the bad ones. And it's just, like I said, it feels the most like last season is when we're watching the goaltending, and that's it's hard.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up the Colorado goals too, because like the Kiviranta goal, we mentioned it earlier, right? Is one of those kind of momentum moments at the end of the first period. And I think we both agreed that one, again, Grub played it okay, but if his arm is just a little bit longer, right? If he's a slightly bigger goalie, and a couple of those goals comes down to just the fact that he's a little bit small by NHL goalie standards. And what do you do about that? Like, really, what do you do about that? It just I don't even know what to say is the solution to that, right? And I think that can also be a factor when you have two goalies that, look, they're listed at 6'1" and 6'2", which is not small by any means, right? But you look at some of the goalies the Kraken have played against, and actually really their last, 5 games, all the goalies they've faced have been 6'4" or taller. That's just kind of what goaltending is in the NHL at this point. And so you do have those goals on the margins when you have a smaller goalie tandem that, if they're not really on their game, are going to go in.
Right. Or if a shot is just kind of perfectly placed around them, the way the Colorado ones felt, that's just it. And there is sometimes nothing you can do about it. And just to kind of go off onto a little tangent here, RJ, just because this has been also a little bit of a theme for this year, is kind of feeling conditioned from last season to think certain things, or to immediately go to the negative. I've noticed this mostly on the Discord, but on Twitter as well, kind of as games have gone on. And this past week was a little bit rougher than some other parts of this season just because of the 3 losses, kind of all coming back to back to back there. And I do feel like as a fan base, a lot of people were kind of conditioned by last season to think that the moment something bad happens, it means everything's bad, and to kind of immediately go to the negative. And again, like I said, that's something I'm fighting against too. It's just been because of how many kind of positives I've seen from this group and from the coaching staff that it's been enough for me not to kind of go all the way there. But one of the things that I think is important to note, and these Colorado goals kind of pointed out well, and I think we should bring it up, is just there's also a tendency to, if a goal is scored against the Kraken, immediately try to blame somebody, right? Like, oh, it's on this guy. This guy effed up. He should have been here, whatever, right? Or the goalie, Grew just didn't play it well. That's on Grew. You got to make that save, right? Something like that. And there are obviously times in which that is the case, but there's also a lot of goals scored in the National Hockey League where they're just good plays made by an offense. And like, that's okay. Like sometimes teams just score because they hit their spot. It's a perfectly placed shot. The Nathan McKinnon goal. Like that's just one of the best players in the world doing something that only the best players in the world can do. And there's nothing wrong with that. You know, obviously you don't want it to happen against your team, but it happens and it's okay. And I think that that's something, and that when, you know, you and I, or whether it's Allison Lucan or any of the analysts on TV, Eddie Olczyk breaking down a play, JT Brown breaking down a play on a broadcast, when we're breaking it down, we're not trying to place blame on anybody for poor positioning or, you know, goaltender not being square to the shooter or whatever it is. We're just trying to explain like what happened there, right? Like, oh, this guy was puck watching. It meant this other guy could sneak behind him. And then we get the, you know, he's just lost in coverage, and that half a second window he now has to make a play, he's able to make a play because the margins are that small at the NHL level, is that you basically have to play perfect all of the time. It's an unreasonable expectation for anybody to have. And so, you know, when we're doing it, we're not necessarily trying to blame anybody. We're just trying to point out, like, this is how goals happen in the NHL, is because guys are going to make mistakes on both ends. And when you're playing with the best players in the world against the best players in the world, any mistake creates that little bit of margin of error that goals come from. And that's just the way hockey is. Obviously, you want to limit the mistakes. You want to try to play mistake free, but it's unrealistic, and guys are going to make mistakes, and you point them out, not to criticize them, but just to showcase, okay, that's something, just don't let it happen again, right? This is a learning moment. This unique situation popped up. Next time that situation kind of comes along, don't play it the same way.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point that you're making there. And the Colorado game kind of drove it home to me too. And I'm glad you were there next to me too, because I was like, okay, what went wrong here? I'm trying to kind of break down or diagnose these goals. I'm trying to get a tweet out really quickly, and I think what we came up with, like basically 3 times in a row with the Colorado goals, was just like, that's just good play.
Yeah,
like, that's just good play. There's nothing to point out, and you're right that the whole point is to kind of educate and explain. Okay, something happened big in a game. Why did it happen? And there was really nothing on the Kraken end that explained why it happened. It was just, a Colorado player making a good play. Like the McKinnon goal is a perfect example. And I think you explained also really well. And you're like, for all the patrons listening, like the defensive systems video, right? How there's a plan defensively of what you're trying to execute. And the whole point of the offense, right, is to kind of disrupt what that plan is, and to make it chaotic and to kind of open up mistakes. And that's basically how it works. And so, thank goodness there's not mistake-free hockey, because that'd be very boring to watch.
Yes.
Like, you wouldn't get goals. And so really, I mean, the most fun parts of hockey are when there are mistakes made too. So I think it is important to not kind of get like too negative, or basically, not to kind of point that arrow of blame too strongly, and just, keep in perspective that, mistakes happen, but it's important to know why goals, end up the way that they do.
Right. It's just part of, a game broadcast, right? Is just to explain what it is that's happening. And it doesn't mean, like I said, blame needs to be thrown around, or it needs to go into a file folder of like, why this guy, really stinks or whatever. That being said, if guys are making too many mistakes sort of consistently, a la, say, Jeremy Lauzon year one, just as an example, it is an indication that, like,
Still
okay,
catching, yeah.
maybe we do need to move in a different direction there from him.
Yep.
Speaking of kind of building off of that, RJ, and talking about players, I referenced it earlier. We kind of both referenced it. You referenced a good play made by Matty Beniers. I kind of referenced some of the times this week where I feel like he's struggled. But the bottom line is Matty Beniers, obviously McCann and Eberly continue to do their thing. It almost just feels expected now, whatever. But Matty Beniers really showed up this week in a big way. And I think that deserves to be talked about.
Yeah, and it's very important to the Kraken that he kind of found his game a little bit. And I think the Winnipeg game was really where everything kind of turned around for him. And he kind of looked like he figured things out. That game, fantastic for him. He scores a couple goals, but really, I feel like that wasn't even the biggest story. It was just how he looked every shift he was out there, offensively, defensively. It was what you'd hope from a second overall pick who plays a 200-foot game. And it just looked like this is the blueprint, right? And actually, I think I was pulling it up from Kraken stats. Yeah, he had gone 142 games since his last 2-goal game. It was November of 2022. And when I said it was the best game we've seen him play in a long time, especially knowing that, I stand by it.
Oh, absolutely. No, he looked fantastic in that one. He looked like, yes, somebody who was a second overall pick who has that ability to single-handedly change a game, to go out there and impose himself upon another team. And arguably, as great as McCann and Eberly have been, RJ, we haven't seen a player look like that this season. And Matty looked like that in the Winnipeg game. He played fantastic. I guess one of the things that you could say about Matty Beniers is we have seen that in such brief flashes, right? It's always like a game here or there, and they're very spread out, and so it could be a little frustrating that we're not seeing that from him more consistently, because if we were, he would just be a dominant player. This team would look extremely different. The success that they would have would be very evident. He's still young. There's still plenty of opportunity for him to try to create those games and kind of string them along a little bit better. Basically just import whatever it is he's thinking about and feeling when he plays in Boston just to CPA, right? I think that would probably do it. He always seems to have games like that Winnipeg game in Boston. But he looked fantastic through that one. And so much of what's made him look really good, RJ, and why I feel like the Jared McCann hot start and the Jordan Eberly hot start feels a little bit more sustainable right now than maybe it did a week ago, was because he is on that line with them. And the way he is being able to move the puck up the ice is just so impressive, whether it's inadvertently with him stripping the puck from the other team in the defensive zone, freeing up the puck for a defenseman to then make a play up into the neutral zone for a Jared McCann or a Jordan Eberly. The fact that they kind of get to cheat up high in the defensive zone because they know Matty's back there taking care of business the way we all know he can defensively. Or it's when he has the puck and he's moving with speed, RJ, through the neutral zone. He has just looked like a different player. And that speed thing, I think, is pretty key, because that's something we have not seen him play with the puck as fast as he has here. He has really unlocked a next level as far as being able to move with speed with the puck. And it sounds like we probably know who to thank for that.
I think so. We did see him working with Jess Campbell before practice a couple times this past week, and we know that she is a skating guru and that she can work magic with players skating. And Matty Beniers is a pretty good skater to begin with. And so when you can up that skill, we've seen the results almost immediately, and it has driven a lot of that stuff offensively, like you mentioned. This is the kind of stuff that Jess Campbell brings to a coaching staff. I mean, in addition to, we see her drawing up the plays, we talked about it on the power play and whatnot, but this is where she really shines, is the skills work with players like this, the individual, the one-on-one, the making a player skating better and allowing them to unlock parts of their game by improving their skating. And man, Matty Beniers, a great, I know she's working with other players too, but this is a great project, if you will, to take on, because he has that high-end ability. We've seen it in spurts, right? We know he can be a difference maker, and the skating is unlocking that. And I think part of it too, players have mentioned also we're working on the mental health side of the game and making sure your mind is right. And I do think with Matty, a lot of it can be confidence driven, because we saw in his first goal in that game, that shot to beat Connor Hellebuck short side high. That is a perfect shot. And you know what? It had to be perfect because Hellebuck's a heck of a goalie and he's big and there really aren't that many spaces available. But having the confidence to attempt that shot and the skill to execute on it, very few players have that. But Matty Beniers is one of those guys. That's kind of why I'm always ragging on him about the shot selection. I feel like he's not ambitious enough because I know he can hit those spots. He just doesn't always really try to. And if he can just mentally be in a space where he believes that he can hit that spot fairly often, that's what I want to see from him, is that confidence. And that we haven't seen that, before practice. We don't know what she's talking with him about, but I have to imagine there's a mental side to this thing as well, because players have mentioned it. We're just knowing that you can get the best out of your game. Like, that's a big part of what she does as well. And Dan's talked about that too.
Yeah, and I feel like players in CV have talked about that with Dan in the past. Very much feels like that's something he brings as well. So you have both him, you have Jess. It feels like Bob Woods is that kind of guy too, right? For defensemen, like he just kind of has that. He's kind of always got a smile on his face. He's working with the players, talking to them individually during practices. Like, it very much feels like that was one of the ideas when assembling this coaching staff, was to find people that are going to go out there and really support the players, right? And build them up. And that's something that was important when, yes, you were able to make 2 big acquisitions, but largely this was going to be the same roster from the previous season. You were going to need to kind of build up confidence after everything they went through last year. And it does seem like the Kraken were able to kind of put together the perfect coaching staff for that. What I loved about both goals for Matty there, RJ, is, the first one, yes, the different shot selection. He sees the one hole that's going to be there and he goes for it and he hits it and he makes an incredible play. Looks fantastic. The second one, getting the tip, right? Just doing Matty things again. High skill play. It's not something we see the Kraken do all that often, but he's a guy who can do it. What I liked about both of them, though, was it really highlights how interesting of a, in quotes, first line this creates for the Kraken with Jared McCann and Jordan Eberly, because I talked about how both of those two guys in the defensive zone get to cheat up a little bit, get to be there and try to create odd man rushes with each other and really attack with speed going up the ice because of what he does defensively. He kind of does the opposite in the offensive zone. He kind of cheats back a little bit, right? Because he knows both these guys, they're going to go to the net. That's the system. He plays a little bit higher up in the zone than what we're seeing from the rest of the centers in this offense, right? We're seeing Chandler Stevenson do a lot of work down by the goal line. He wants to kind of cut through east-west down low, make plays to guys, suck in the defense, and then open somebody up and give them the puck. Shane Wright wants to kind of drive down the heart of a defense and get his shot off or go dig a puck out of the corner. Yanni Gourde, we know what he wants to do net front. Matty Beniers is playing a lot higher up in the zone. And what I find interesting is when this line, they attack with speed with the wingers, and if they don't succeed there, when they kind of start their cycle game, it really then means Matty Beniers is open in a completely different spot. And as defenses do kind of collapse down to try to take away those net front chances, because that's what the Kraken really want to go for, he operated with a lot of space a little bit higher up. He was still in the slot for both those goals, but he was a little bit higher up and he was largely left alone. And I think that that's another thing that could be interesting, is just having him play a little bit different than the other centers on this team means defenses are going to leave him alone a little bit. He's finding time and space for himself so that he can go out there and make a shot like he did on that first goal. And I think that that's kind of intriguing, that line can hit you with speed and then otherwise kind of go into a more traditional cycle look than what the rest of the team is doing.
And I think that time and space is what we saw him have a lot as a rookie, where he thrived, where teams hadn't really kind of clued in on him, keyed in on him, tried to body him up yet. Now he's having to kind of create that space or find those areas himself, right? Because teams are worried about him a little bit, but that's fine, right? The time and space is what's important. And I think he is starting to find those areas. I know you've been a proponent of him kind of going to the high slot for a while, especially for tips and things like that. And we are kind of seeing it come together because he has McCann and Eberly who are just playing lights out on that line, and teams just have to respect the two of them as well.
Right. And it helps him pick up, assists and get on the board that way too, right? Just having that point production that we've all wanted to see from him. He's always been a perimeter guy. He's somebody who sees the ice better from afar and sees his opportunities better there. And with him kind of cycling just kind of back and forth in the zone in that high slot area, puts him in a dangerous spot to score, yes, with his shot. But it also means that then when one of those two guys breaks towards the middle or they break net front, he's able to hit them with passes there. And I think that's partly why he's been able to also pick up some of these assists as well, not just the ones that kind of come from the breakouts he's leading from the defensive zone. So I think that's an interesting kind of thing that I noticed this past week from him. It was obviously most evident in that Winnipeg game, but it did carry over to the other games, and I'm kind of intrigued to see if that continues for him, and hopefully he continues to have success.
Yeah, this is clearly the team's best line also, and
Yes.
to have a line you can put out there is going to generate. Heck, even against Carolina, they were the only line I thought that generated anything really dangerous consistently at all. And so you do have pretty clearly a top line, which is something this team desperately needs.
Yes, so they have that line that they can work with, RJ. I know, coaches, they talk about it in terms of pairs and finding players to pair together. I kind of want to take stock of where we think some of the pairs are, what we think the pairs are, and where we feel like guys have been their best versions of themselves. Because another player that was kind of talked about throughout the course of the week on an upward trajectory and then maybe down at the very end there, for me anyway, is Andre Burakovsky. And I feel like being paired with Shane Wright on what felt like kind of a leftovers line, kind of felt like him and Shane Wright together really worked well together in those couple games. And then in that last game against Carolina, Berkey goes back up to Chandler Stevenson's line. And I felt like the production and just the feel and the confidence from him dipped from where we saw him with Shane Wright.
Yeah, it's been really tough trying to find a place for Andre Burakovsky. And I've said this before, it feels like whatever line he's on kind of becomes the leftovers line. And I will say that right, it was Karche, right? Karche,
Yes.
Wright, Burakovsky line definitely felt like a leftovers line.
Yeah.
As far as when it was created, but you could see the hints of chemistry there between, Shane and Berkey, and especially just on paper, it sounds like it would make sense, right? You want somebody like a Burakovsky who kind of can work the perimeter and have that vision to kind of feed the puck to a Shane Wright, where I know you've been harping on this all season. Ideally, you want him in a position to shoot. You want him in the slot, even though he has been kind of taking on that forechecking role himself. It does seem like it could make sense. That line as a whole, I don't know. I think the fact that it was just kind of these pieces thrown together, I don't know if the fit is the best with like a Ty Karche on there as well. Even though you'd think on paper he could go in and dig those pucks out and kind of be the big forechecker on that line. I don't know how well that really worked in practice.
Agreed.
But I think there is something in that pair to potentially look at. The thing I'm concerned about, though, is like I think it's more important to put Shane Wright in a position where he can build some confidence and start to produce a little bit more. And I don't know. I mean, who would you go with as a third player on that line?
I don't know. And that's why I was just kind of talking about it from a pairs standpoint, because
right.
I don't know how you round out that group, but it felt like there was something there that really kind of got Berkey going in a way that we hadn't seen before. And then it was kind of talked about that he was like promoted back up to the Chandler Stevenson line. And I was kind of like, I don't know that he needs to be. Like, I feel like he was kind of his best version of himself with Shane Wright there, and the way that he could then become the offensive focal point of that line. Right. And that's very much what it felt like through, was it the Colorado game or the Winnipeg game? But it was just consistently, he was moving the puck up the ice with speed. He was entering the offensive zone. He was button hooking and looking for guys to pass to. And he was able to make those passes, and he looked good and strong, and he looked confident, most importantly. And I think that Berkey, when confident, is a heck of a player. I mean, right now he's on pace for 50-ish assists on the season. That's pretty good. Like that's like he's in good shape right now. He's tied for third on the team in point scoring with 5 points. They're all assists. Obviously, you'd like to see him get a goal at some point, but I would take a 50 assist season from Andre Burakovsky, a season in which he leads the power play production. He's got 3 assists on the power play. He's really been the guy driving the power play, especially with Vince Dunn out. I feel like he is playing at times good hockey, and it's just I want to continue to see that from him. And if Shane is going to just want to put in and be like a blue collar guy out there and dig out pucks in the corner and not really take, be aggressive about creating chances for himself, then you know what? Give Andre Burakovsky time and space and let him go out there and produce.
Again, I think there might be something to that, but I'm still going to overall disagree with you on this as far as just how to prioritize things. Because you talked about Burakovsky's production. You got 3 of those 5 assists on the power play. And I think on the power play, he's done some great work. Like, leave him where he is, doing great. That said, at even strength, I haven't seen enough from him to say that it's worth prioritizing, kind of trying to get him right and get him going, as opposed to making sure that Shane Wright is in the best position to succeed. And I just went over to Money Puck here to see how like the lines, are doing. And unfortunately, there's not enough ice time because the minimum threshold of 10 minutes is kind of the least I can look at it. And so Shane hasn't been with Burakovsky for that 10 minutes that I need to get some numbers here. But I look at Bjorkstrand, Wright, Tolvanen, and they've got the second highest expected goals percentage on the team of any line, behind only just the Beniers, McCann, and Eberly line we were just talking about. And the early results for that have been good. And I look at any line that Burakovsky's been on, basically the 2 combinations he's been on, and they're toward the bottom, whether it's with Stevenson and Schwartz or Beniers and Tolvanen earlier. And I just think if you're going to prioritize kind of putting one guy over the other in a position to succeed, I'm going to go with Shane. I kind of don't want to mess with that. If you can maybe, I wouldn't mind experimenting, especially if things, if they go south, if you lose to Montreal and you look bad, maybe try switching things up a little bit more. But I want to see at least one more game of Shane with Bjorkstrand and Tolvanen, just because the early results I think have been fairly good. And I want to get beyond that Carolina game, right, where it's just a buzzsaw you're running into. I want to see what they do against a favorable matchup as well. I hate to say it, look, because Burakovsky, you would love to be able to get more production out of him. You'd love to be able to kind of salvage that situation. I just don't know that it's worth prioritizing over really anything else at this point.
Well, and that's one of the points I'm trying to make, is that Berkey right now is not like disappointing. Like, he is being the best version of himself. He's on track for 50 assists. Like, if you had said, hey, Berkey's only going to have 50 assists this year, we'd be like, oh my God, what do you mean only? Like, I absolutely would take that production, right? Like, Berkey is finally kind of doing it here. And that's kind of one of the points I'm trying to make, is like, we're still acting like Berkey's being disappointing. And I'm like, no, this is the best Berkey we have seen in a Seattle Kraken sweater. It's not exciting. He's not scoring goals, but he's absolutely producing for this group. I'm with you. Obviously, the priority should be Shane Wright. The problem is Shane Wright right now doesn't seem to be making himself the priority out there on the ice, right? He is not playing like somebody who is going out there and trying to generate a lot of offense for himself. He looks like somebody who, in his mind, is still playing a bottom 6 role, and he is there to facilitate things for other guys. He is there to contribute in something he knows he can do better than most guys on this team, and that is play physical, win puck battles down low. That's something he's good at. He's got the upper body build that is just tailor-made for it in a way nobody else on this team really has. He looks to me like somebody who has not been told, look, dude, you're a top 6 center. You need to be producing points for us. Go out there and score, the way that he has in other situations. He looks like somebody who is very much approaching each and every game as a 4th line center. And so until you prioritize Shane Wright by giving him more ice time or throwing him out there in different situations, right? We've talked about his deployment. He's being deployed in the defensive zone almost 2/3 of the time. Like, that's it. You're not prioritizing Shane Wright as an offensive piece as it is, and he doesn't seem to be doing it for himself either. So if that's the case, then you might as well try to maximize production from his line by putting him with guys that can then he can open up stuff for them.
I'm with you on Shane.
He's got 9 shots. Like, he's not even shooting the puck. Like, that used to be a thing he did.
I'm with you on Shane Wright. Again, I think you want to put him in position to shoot the puck, and I'm with you completely on that, but I have to disagree with you on Burakovsky. I still don't think, at even strength, at 5-on-5, I still don't think he's playing well. I'll just say it like that, because the power play is one thing. at 5-on-5, I just don't see it. And I went to Natural Stat Trick just to see if the numbers like back, because I'm just going off of eye test
Right.
at this point. But on the whole team, last on the team in expected goals for percentage when he's on the ice, last on the team in scoring chances, a percentage of scoring chances when he's on the ice, last on the team in shot attempts share when he's on the ice, last on the team in actual goals scored percentage when he's on the ice. Of all the skaters, I don't look. He's not the Burakovsky he was last season, right? He's better than he was last year when I think he was maybe playing a little bit worried because from being injured, and I don't really blame him for that. But I don't see how. Look, maybe there's something chemistry wise with him and Shane Wright, but I don't know that putting the guy who all the numbers say, and I, at least from my watching of the game, says that has been maybe one of the Kraken's worst forwards this season. How putting him next to Shane Wright is going to like unlock that confidence and put him in the. I don't know how it's even going to put him in the offensive zone in positions to shoot and everything. I just don't know that Burakovsky drives anything.
What Berkey has done really well, and I think if you were to put Berkey on a line with McCann or Eberly right now, it would look completely different and the numbers would be completely different. And it wouldn't just be because he was playing with a better player, right? What Berkey is doing is he's doing the exact same thing that McCann and Eberly are doing at least when he was playing with Shane Wright, which is he's getting up the ice quick. He's moving through the neutral zone with the puck. He's getting controlled zone entries. The problem is, and this was also an issue with like that Shane Wright line where Shane was doing the Matty thing of opening things up for his wingers, but then the other winger is Ty Cartier. Berkey gets into the offensive zone with a lot of speed, and he's just got nobody with him, right? McCann and Eberly have each other, and so they're able to work off of that. Yanni Gourde and Tanev have had each other when they get into the offensive zone with speed, and they've been able to work off of that. Berkey, regardless of what line he's been on, it feels like he's getting those controlled entries. And again, this is just based on my eye test, but he never has anybody there to do anything with. And so I want to see him maybe in a spot like that. And I think some of those numbers would reverse because having him play with Chandler Stevenson, who has 5 shots on goal, right? Like as a guy who himself is not going to shoot, having both of them out there, when are they supposed to generate expected goal share? Nobody's shooting the puck. You can't generate expected goals if nobody's taking a shot on the ice, right? And so I just keep feeling like Berkey has to be separated from Chandler Stevenson, and he's got to be with other guys, but I think he's got to be with other guys that can play with speed.
Yeah, I'm with you on the separated from Stevenson because look, he does need a shooter. He does need a finisher, someone to play with. And I'm looking at just shots on goal among his line mates, right? Like Burakovsky actually had the most shots of Burakovsky, Stevenson, and Schwartz. Burakovsky has the most shots this season of those 3.
Yeah.
And that's probably not what you want from a guy who is more of a playmaker and more of a distributor. And then, with Beniers and Tolvanen, I mean, that's one where they are a little bit more of a shooter. Matty Beniers third on the team in shots, even though we know that can kind of be hit or miss, right? And then Tolvanen has fewer than Berkey. So maybe there is something to putting him with more of a shooter. Although, I don't know on this team who you go with that, that's going to shoot more that isn't breaking up the McCann, Eberly, Beniers line. Which you don't want to break up. I think you agree you don't want to break that up. Maybe Bjorkstrand.
Bjorkstrand's the only one. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's tough, but I think that's why we're seeing the power play production from Berkey and no 5-on-5 production. And the 5-on-5 numbers are so bad for him is because on the power play, guys, you're mostly in the offensive zone. Guys are looking to shoot the puck, and Berkey is able to make things happen there.
But he also has time and space that you're just not going to get it.
Well, but that's what I'm saying is
5-on-5 really.
He is at times creating that time on space. It's just he doesn't have anybody with him to do anything with it, right? Because his time and space is just, now I have time to make a great pass, right? Again, if he has nobody to pass the puck to because nobody's moved up the ice as quick as he has, it doesn't matter, right? And that's what I was seeing a lot in the Colorado game was he was getting up the ice, he was getting through the neutral zone, he was sucking in a defender, he was getting those great controlled zone entries, and then there was just nobody there for him to make a play with, and so the whole thing just fizzles out, and you don't get that positive expected goal production because there was no chance, but it wasn't because of Berkey, it was because of the rest of the line.
This has been an interesting
I know. I wasn't expecting to have this. No, but I
have more respect for your position than I had going into this thing.
Yeah.
but I don't know that you fully convinced me, but I do. Look, I want to see it now. I at
Right.
least want to see the experiment run. I'm not convinced that it would work, but I want to see what would happen.
Yeah. Again, whether it's right or not, like I think, by that I mean Shane Wright, not correct.
Yes, yes, I got you.
Whether it's right or not, I think at some point Berkey needs to match with somebody else who can play with speed. Again, stick Berkey with Yanni Gordon, Brandon Tanev. I bet you that line produces just because they're all going to be moving with speed. Like they're going. I guarantee you it'll be the best expected goals percentage of any of the lines Berkey's on, just because they'll actually generate chances.
Yeah, and I will say, well, like who's the shooter on that line? At least by the stats, Brandon Tanev. He's 5th on the team in shots on goal.
Yes,
One behind Jared McCann.
Yeah. Pucks in some capacity will be making its way towards the net. You could debate about the quality of those shots being taken, but pucks will be going towards the net. Unlike when he's paired with Chandler Stevenson, where we've seen it, they control the puck really well in the offensive zone. That line with Schwartz and Stevenson and Berkey, there's been a lot of times where we can see them. They cycle. No shot ever comes of it. And so what's the point, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's something that the Kraken at some point are going to have to get away from. Either you drill it into their heads that they need to shoot, or you just got to break up the group, because I guess it's positive zone possession time. You're giving other lines a rest, but at some point you'd want them to do something in theory.
Right. And you know what? Actually, I think you've convinced me on Gord Tanev Burakovsky, because it's a low stakes enough experiment that you're not messing with anything else.
Yeah.
Yeah. Give me that. I just want to see how that goes.
But yeah, the Shane Wright thing is also an issue, but it's a very separate issue, which is at some point you need to explain and get it through to Shane Wright that he can play the way he did in his call-up last year, where he just kind of played fast, loose, and easy, and he was just like, oh yeah, I'm just here to see if I can score goals at the National Hockey League level, and Jordan Eberly was very clearly just there to set him up over and over and over, and there wasn't really a plan beyond, we're just going to give Shane confidence. This year, Shane, I'm telling you, he looks exactly like bottom 6 center CV Shane, which is, I'm here to support this team on their Calder Cup run. And that's the way Shane Wright's playing right now. And again, that is not best for his long-term development. That's not what you want out of Shane Wright. He is very good at it. He is helping the team. He's being a positive asset to you. But this is not what Shane Wright is supposed to be.
And realistically, they're going to need more than that from him. Like, he's great at that role. He can do it well, as you said. But frankly, with where this team is at from a production standpoint, goal scoring, they're going to need more than that. They actually are going to lean on him pretty heavily if they're going to make the playoffs. They're going to need him to step up and kind of just be willing to take on more.
Right, exactly. So we'll see if they can do that. You too.
They just need another McCann and Eberly.
I know. Well, that's the thing is, right? Like McCann and Eberly are scoring goals, and then it's, it's a handful of guys with 2 and then a bunch of guys with 1. And again, you can get by with that kind of depth scoring as long as every night you're getting like 1 or 2 of those depth guys to step up and kind of contribute. And that's been a little hit or miss here so far. But you two can see if Shane Wright's going to do this, maybe because he's going to be playing in Montreal, RJ, and you can watch these games happen at Queen Anne Beer Hall.
That's right. And you can sound super smart. Take some of Dylan's talking points. Talk to the people around you. Be like, look, I think they should go with this. I think they should put Shane Wright with Andre Burakovsky. Maybe they'll tell you you're wrong, like maybe I would. But it'll be fun conversation with the people, because they've got those long tables, right? It's a great place also to meet fellow fans and talk to people, right? You're not just kind of isolated at your little table. It's a great kind of group community atmosphere too.
Yes. You two can have the discussion of Andre Burakovsky is one of our worst players on paper, and yet he's on track to have his 2nd most productive season ever.
What do you make of that? What does that mean? Queen Anne Beer Hall make of that?
I don't know. But you could go and have that discussion with fellow Kraken fans at Queen Anne Beer Hall while we watch this road trip, and then the team will be coming home soon. But I'm really looking forward.
Actually, real quick, sorry, Dylan. Yeah. I have some breaking news.
We avoid the curse?
Yes, we do avoid the curse. So we can talk about this for just like a couple minutes here. But the Kraken have made their call-ups for the road trip.
Okay.
So they called up Cale Fleury, and then John Hayden is the forward that they called up for the road trip. So I'm not really surprised by these two names. If I kind of had to bet on it, these are the 2 that I would have thought. But any thoughts real quick about those 2 joining the team for the road trip? Because they're going to need an extra forward defenseman. That's why they're being called up.
Yes.
But thoughts on those 2 specifically?
Yeah, and with Vince Dunn on LTIR, you have the cap space to do it. The Cale Fleury one really doesn't surprise me, because he's been up and down
Right.
as they've needed him as the call up there on defense. We know Dan trusts him. That makes a lot of sense. The Hayden one, we had talked about this a little bit after the last post game, during last post game. Ben Meyers kind of feels like a better fit for the way this team is playing right now than John Hayden, but you're going on a road trip. You're going to be facing a team coached by Greg Berube, right? Like, you're going to be going up against some of these teams. This is just an extra forward. John Hayden makes sense. He's a veteran presence. He can step into the lineup. He's not going to be a negative asset for you. I think that makes sense.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think, look, if all goes well and everyone stays healthy, this is probably
don't
somebody
need
who's
him.
going to be in the press box for the entire road trip.
Yeah.
And I think having a veteran like that over, say a younger player that you could call up a Winterton, heck, even like a Shawley or a Furcus, whatever, you want them getting into games. And so you want a specific plan for them to play. And I just don't know that there's, barring an injury, a plan for the extra call up to play. So I think he's a good extra to have.
Yes. I feel like, if it was maybe a homestand, I would think maybe bring in Ben Meyers, let him play that system, play with speed, all that kind of stuff. But for a road trip, never hurts to have a guy who's big, tough, physical, can go in there and grind it out for you. Get you to those good road periods, RJ.
Yes, that's what you want.
That's what you want. So excited to see them on the road trip. Excited to see them in person in Toronto. Should be a lot of fun. Want to thank everybody so much for listening. Want to thank Queen Anne Beer Hall one last time for sponsoring the podcast. And we will see you all next time.
Hey everyone, before we go, we just wanted to give a quick shout out to all of our awesome patrons over at patreon.com/Emerald City Hockey, especially our Terror of the Deep patrons.
Thank you so much for making all this possible. We really appreciate your support.